exceptional knowledge and insight today, a warm welcome to Global Chief People Officer, Joe Regan-Iles.
Hi, I'm Joe Regan-Iles. I've been in HR now over 20 years. I've managed global teams, and I have to say, I think the last couple of years has been the most challenging for me and the most challenging for anyone in HR and anyone in business. What I'd like to talk about today at the conference is really around, how can we transform our HR strategies, bearing in mind the new way of working, the future of work. So we've all got at the moment, we've got work from home, we've got hybrid models, we've got people working in the office. So from a business point of view, what is it that you actually need from your HR teams? I would say at the moment from HR teams' point of view, it's really important around attracting talent, the cost of attrition, which we'll come to in a moment. How do you actually nurture talent? So when you've worked really, really hard to recruit people, how do you actually make sure the onboarding is right? How do you nurture them? How do you make them feel as if they belong? How do you make them feel that they really understand in our new world, how they fit into the culture? I think as well, in the contacts industry, many of us for many years have had really good careers. If I look back on mine, I've had a great career to date in the contact centre. How can we as an industry ensure that in the future, the next generation wants to come and work in a contact centre, graduate programs, apprenticeship programs? How can we make sure that we're leaving a legacy when we all move on to do different things? So I want to look at that as well. The other thing that's changed for everyone as well is benefits, employee benefits. So I think from an attraction point of view and the benefits, how can you work with your HR teams to actually look at and understand, how people, want to be rewarded at work, what's important for one person might not be important for another person. And I think as well, from your HR teams and from my HR teams, it's really about how can we be agile? So, things are changing, weekly and monthly. So from a HR strategy point of view, how can we build a strategy that not only aligns with the business plan, but also can adapt and can change when things happen very quickly? And from a HR point of view, when I've interviewed HR people in the past, some of the criteria has been and remains that they understand employment law, that they've got lots of HR experience. But I think one thing over the last 2 years is more and more important, especially when I'm recruiting my HR leaders, is really around how can they demonstrate they can be agile? How can they demonstrate they can manage change? Because when you're looking to your business partner from a HR point of view, you want someone that's by your side, supporting you, and also reacting really quickly. I think we all remember a couple of years ago where we were, what we were doing, when we were all told, we've got to go home, we're going into lockdown, so everyone dealt with their own thing. I think we'll remember that for ages. So from a HR point of view, how can you work and how can you, work with your business partners to make sure that we've got different HR strategies? So if I think from a HR point of view at the moment, how do we actually measure the success of HR, or how do you measure the success of HR? I think if you think about, what I said at the beginning around, what is the function of HR? HR is the end-to-end employee life cycle. So we have to make sure that, we understand and we attract people and we have a really good employee value proposition. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, why should somebody go and work for your organization? So, when you advertise roles, when you're attracting people, what is it that makes somebody think, wow, I really want to go and work for that organization, I'm going to send my application? Because we know at the moment there is lots and lots of vacancies, and we know at the moment that people are perhaps thinking about a different career after lockdown and the times that we've all had. So if we look at, different statistics that you've all seen over the past couple of years, a few for me, do stick in my mind. Deloitte have had some really good surveys recently. And what Deloitte was saying was that they'd surveyed employers, and 64% of all employers who were actually surveyed felt that, they were expecting, in 2022, that, employees would be leaving, they'd have higher attrition. So if we think of top reasons for leaving, why do people leave? I'm sure, like most of you, I really, really enjoy, employee surveys, but more importantly, the data that comes out of that. And if I think about, the recent McKinsey Great Resignation report in 2021, that really looked at, 54% of employees that were leaving didn't feel valued. 51% didn't feel like they belonged. And staggeringly, 36% of people that had left didn't have a job to go to. So those people had obviously made a decision that, they wanted to take some time out. They wanted to reevaluate where they wanted to be, as an example. So I think when we're looking forward and we're actually looking at, how can we build HR strategies in the new hybrid working way that we're all in, what are some of those things that, we do need to look at? So I think, I recently published an article on LinkedIn, and it was around work-life balance, and it was around people wanting greater flexibility. And this particular survey had said that, 48% of employees hadn't had a wellbeing check-in with their employer in 2022, which I really found staggering. Comparing that to 2021, when 24% of people had had a check-in. So we'll talk about well-being later, but I think, the role of employers, the role of HR, it is really, really changing. If I think back when I started my HR career, it was lots about employee relations. It was always about supporting managers, as an example. But more and more now, HR, have had to be more resilient, and they've had to introduce lots of wellbeing strategies, which you'll see published all the time. And the wellbeing strategies, the CSR strategies, are what people expect now, and candidates expect when they're actually, coming to work for your organization. So I think from a HR strategy, point of view, I think some of the things I'd like to look at are, how do you actually measure, the success of HR in your business? So it's really important for business to have a really strong HR strategy, which can be aligned, change quickly, and also always needs to be reviewed as part of, monthly board meetings. I like to make sure that from a data point of view, HR for me has always been about data. It always will be. And with my business partner, it's really around them understanding, what's driving some of the behaviors in the organization. And the only way that I can share that with them is if I've got a really good HR system, I've got really good data analytics, and I then with my team can turn that into, high level overviews with action plans, that then we can look to improve the business from a HR point of view. So if we look at some of the key drivers now, if I look at, the cost of leavers. So in the contact center industry, we all know thousands and thousands of people, have a very varied career. So what is the cost of those leavers? The cost of the leaver is knowledge retention, so that person has worked really hard, and all of that knowledge from the customer is going out, is leaving with that individual. What's the impact on other people in the team seeing people leaving? So especially if you're an organization that you've got really high attrition. So what's the impact on others seeing lots of people leaving, seeing their friends leave? The cost of retraining, which is really important. And then also the cost of that experience and how long it takes then for that person to be able to offer that really good customer service in the contact center. And, if we haven't got that right, and we constantly have leavers in our workplaces, then customer dissatisfaction, customer escalations, So from that point of view, whether we are an outsourced provider, as I work in, or whether we're an in-house customer service centre, the customers can't get through, so it's dissatisfaction. We live in a review world now where that they can go on and leave reviews about customer service, which isn't what we want. So I think that's really important. Also, the cost of sick absence. So sick absence is something HR need to be measuring all the time, but also what they also need to be doing is putting meaningful action plans together so that we can work with managers to try and improve sickness and also work with our colleagues to ensure that they have, a safe return to work when they're feeling, able to return to work. The other thing as well, I think, from a HR point of view, is more and more I'm measured on, and I measure my own HR leaders on, is that's around the culture. So how do people actually feel working in that organisation? How can they actually measure what that looks like? Culture's quite difficult to define, isn't it? If we think about, how we would describe the culture in our organisation, sometimes that can be very difficult to measure. We have great employee engagement tools, and again, there's lots of different technologies that you can use to constantly be measuring, employee sentiment, how are your employees feeling? And with a lot of employee engagement technology that I use and I really like, it gives you, you can vary the questions that you ask. One of the favorite questions I like to ask at the moment is, do you feel as if you belong in that organization? Do you feel as if you're, where you're going in that organization? So I think data and employee engagement is really key. I think if we look back over the last couple of years, perhaps when we were all working, in an office, it was very easy to try and measure to measure employee engagement because we're all together. But how can we now measure that when we have, so many of our employees and our colleagues all working from home? It's much easier in the office, but how do we, measure the success of people working at home? And how do we actually measure, how they're feeling? I remember during the lockdown periods, there was lots of articles about survey fatigue and we were sending too many surveys. But you really need a starting point, and you do need to actually understand how your people are feeling. There's lots of different ways of doing that. And I think from a HR skill set point of view now, it's really important to have somebody in your team that owns and manages working with your operational teams, that whole employee experience and that whole employee feedback, because there's so much that we can do and so much to measure that has a real impact on the bottom line and can improve retention, attrition, absence, and generally satisfaction. So from a HR strategy point of view, I think some of the things that I always recommend, especially as we're looking at the future of work, especially as we're looking at how do we transform in the new hybrid office home working model, whichever one you've chosen, from a HR strategy point of view, one of the things that's really important is communication. And when I say communication, from an employee's point of view, do they understand the part they play in the workplace? Do they know what's happening? Do they have regular communication? How do you communicate with them? It's very easy to communicate in the office, but what tools do you use to make sure that everyone's getting the right message, the correct message in a timely manner? So I think from a strategic point of view and from a HR point of view, as we're now working in all different ways, it's just really important at all times to actually ensure that we do understand how our people are feeling. I think that's really important. And also, we live in a society now of reviews. So if you look at your own organisation's Glassdoor review, I think, a lot of the time that will actually show you, but it will also show perhaps clients and it was also show candidates for the future, what your organisation's like. So it's really important that you understand how your employees do feel, because if not, you don't want it to be a shock when you go onto Glassdoor and see how somebody's felt about their experience at your organization. We talk a lot around in HR around measuring exit interviews, but with an exit interview, someone's already chosen to leave. It's important to get feedback, but again, I've seen some organizations with 38 questions when someone leaves, whereas really, 2 or 3 questions in an exit interview, you'll be able to then analyze and understand, what improvements, if anything, that you needed to make, but also how you can celebrate success as well. Because attrition can be positive. It's just obviously something that from a HR point of view, as a business, we need to measure. Another thing we need to look at is, how can we attract talent to our organization? And some of that is also around, as I talked about, the employee value proposition. So, looking at your job adverts, do you always review your job adverts? Do you constantly, ask for feedback from new starters? Did the job profile, did the job advert, was that a true reflection of the job that you were actually doing? I would imagine not. So I think it's really important to constantly be looking at that. And what's important to employees as we've come out of this lockdown, employees do want, and there's lots of research to show this, that employees do want, greater flexibility. So in the contact center world, do you just do full-time hours? Can you do part-time hours? Can you do split shifts? Can you do term time contracts? How can you offer to your existing and your new employees, greater flexibility? Because if somebody feels as if, they have a very supportive manager, they feel they've got a good culture, they have lots of great communication, the hours suit their life outside of work, you've got a much greater chance of retaining that employee, if you look at some of those things. So I would always encourage HR teams to constantly be, benchmarking what other organizations are doing, and based on feedback from your own employees. And also if people have turned down your roles, because we know that, candidates are applying for lots of different roles out there. So get some feedback from them, why did you turn this role down? What could we have done better? And I imagine quite a bit of it could be around the flexibility of hours. If you're offering a shift system where you only give people a week's notice about what their working week's going to look like, they can't then plan ahead. So, again, I think that's something that's really, really important, especially from a HR point of view. I think the other thing as well, that I talked about earlier was around, employee well-being. So, I think future candidates expect that now, so I think, we've all done a really good job of embracing and training, and nurturing the whole, mental health first aiders, which I think are brilliant. And, it's great for the employees that are trained to do that, but it's also great in any organization for employees to feel they've got someone to go and talk to. So I'm a really big advocate of mental health first aiders, being one myself. I've also recently introduced menopause champions. So again, we're catering for all of our employees. We're looking at the demographics of our employees. So, by having menopause colleagues in the workplace, I think that was something that was a huge success. If you look at diversity and inclusion as well, employees and candidates want to see that, the workforce that you have represents local communities, etc. So I think that's really worth celebrating, and getting your employees involved as champions. And from a HR point of view, asking a member of the board, as an example, to be a menopause champion, asking a member of the board to be involved in different demographic groups, and have regular meetings with the employees and celebrate all the great things they do, put everything onto social media, internal communication. I think that drives then what the culture can be like in the organization, and how everyone's treated as an individual at work, which is really what we're all trying to do. So I think that's another really important thing from a HR point of view, and that will really help with attraction. I talked about career of choice. There's lots of different learning management systems that organizations are using. and lots of ways of ensuring that people, both inside and outside of work, have access to training systems where they can, do some self-reflection, do some learning, listen to podcasts. So, again, I think that's really important. And also, internal promotions. So, from a recruitment point of view, as an organization, do you always advertise your roles internally? Quite often organizations don't. And I think it's really important to do that. And also from a HR point of view, have a process where if someone is unsuccessful or doesn't get through to an interview stage, have a feedback session and book some time with individuals so they can understand how they can get to that next level next time. I've always been a great believer in mentor programs. I think that's a really good start for any leadership development, to have some mentor programs. And also, speak to employees around, what types of training they'd like to see. What I've seen work really well in the past is modular. So just a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, rather than taking people out of their workplace and their busy jobs for days on end and weeks on end. So, again, I think, if you were to, offer out, a group who could actually talk about, career development and, how we could be a career of choice, get your people involved and get your employees involved in what it means to them, because, obviously they can then speak to their colleagues and put together a really good framework with your learning and development partners. I think employee benefits has really changed as well. So whilst, I think if we asked most people around pay, most people would say, put their hand up, yes, I'd like to earn more. But I think as well, there's other things that are important to people. So, holidays, people have got a lot of catching up to do now. So perhaps, increasing holidays would be seen to some people as a really good benefit. I've seen, holiday, buy schemes where, you can have the money deducted every month from your pay. But then if you wanted to, you had that flexibility to buy additional holidays. So I think, again, the theme of this is really understanding your employees, because one size does not fit all with benefits. But if we look at holidays, if we look at increasing maternity, if we look at increasing paternity, but also, I've seen really good benefit schemes where, people have had their birthday off. I've also seen increases in holidays rather than statutory enhanced holidays. So I think there's lots of different things from a benefit point of view we can do. And, some organizations offer very flexible benefits, so people can choose which benefits, mean something in their organization and mean something to them, depending, where they are in their life, as an example. So again, I think with that, the benefit scheme, I think, again, it's always worth reviewing it, but it's always worth as well, you can't change everything all the time, but even if you just focused on changing a couple of things each year, I think, for employees, I think that would be really good. And it'd be really interesting to then ask a question in the employee survey around the benefits. So I think, again, this is all helping, isn't it, to the whole attraction, nurturing, and people staying within our organizations, which I feel is really good. So I think, the final thing really is around, sustainability. I remember working with a great team where we introduced, after people had passed their probation, which was recognition, we planted a tree in a forest for them, and every month they'd get an update on how much CO2 had been saved and things like that. So again, with regards to, celebrating end of probations and recognition, there's lots of things to do with sustainability that is really good for colleagues, and again, is another attraction method that you can use. So I think if we look back on, what we're trying to do here from a HR point of view, I think it's just, HR working with the business to understand, what the year ahead looks like, some of the priorities, and again, just trying to do some small things sometimes can make a big difference. It doesn't need to be, a really, really expensive thing. It could be just some small things that do make a difference to employees. you.